morning, world. I'm the host. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. We greet you live from the all-America city of Morrisville in North Carolina, the 8th largest state in the United States. And as the host of this show, I have the honor of talking to viewers from all around the United States and the world on the cutting issues of our day: turbulent politics, a looming recession, rising interest rates, gas prices up, nationalism, authoritarianism taking over the world, a war in Ukraine, and divisive elections coming up in 2024. Before we begin, we have a very special guest. It is the holidays, so I took off my Santa hat, but I wanted to have a holiday edition. But real quickly, on this show, we'll be talking after our guest and after I introduce him on the United States plans to send smart bombs to Ukraine, a damaging tornado in New Orleans, and the House of Representatives passing a bill to give Congress more time. Right now, Friday is the deadline until the government shuts down. It looks like December 23rd will be the new deadline. And we're going to talk about, other issues that are important to us in the U.S. and the world. But today, I have a very special guest for about 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. We're going to take a break from the normal politics of the show. In the technology industry, and my guest is in the tech industry, we often talk about digital transformation. We talk about operating systems, how tired I am of having to always keep up with upgrades on my computer, on my devices. But, the greatest and most important operating systems in the world are empathy, humility, giving back, loving your neighbor. And another important one is radical generosity. We celebrated this last week when we did the Tuesday Giving edition. But today I want to introduce a man in Morrisville, a friend of mine, an entrepreneur in the technology industry, and one who has inspired many people around the country and in Morrisville, his hometown. And this is Guri Burmi. Before I bring him in, I just want to say that Guri's nephew got diagnosed with juvenile diabetes during the COVID pandemic in 2020. He lost his job in a tech layoff, and he was so moved. He turned 50 this year, and on his bucket list was to travel across the country in his motorbike. Well, he decided to go ahead and do that, but he did it in honor of his nephew and raise money for juvenile diabetes. Guri began this journey from Morrisville and left on a 6,200-mile voyage all the way to California. I was calling him and interviewed him on the radio as well. And then last Tuesday, right before my council meeting, many of us were able to welcome him back as he rode in with riders from Charlotte and around the great state of North Carolina. I am honored today, and I can't think of a better person to have on our show than Guri Burmi, I would call him our Roku TV Man of the Year Award for radical generosity. So let's bring him in. And Nick, why don't we bring in the panel as well, because we're going to make this interactive and fun, if that's okay. But Guri, welcome to the show. And if you could tell all of us about just what you have done and what you're feeling. So start with the beginning. I tried to highlight it, paraphrase it for you, and then we're just going to have a conversation about it.
Sure, Steve. Thank you so much for having me on. So you very rightly said it. This was a bucket list item, something I'd been wanting to do for a while. And, I was talking to my wife, and she suggested that why don't you make this more meaningful, and let's do something for a cause that's close to our heart. And juvenile diabetes just seemed to be the right fit for us. Because, as you mentioned, my nephew was diagnosed with it about a couple of years ago. It was a really tough time for our family. And we felt that we should try to do something to help cure this disease from its root cause. So we found a charity that has done great work in funding the research that goes into figuring out how type 1 diabetes can be fixed. And we decided to support that charity. Just the timing of the whole thing kind of worked out. It was right after Thanksgiving that I left. And, Thanksgiving is a time when you want to give back to the community. You want to give back to not only your city, but also to your neighbors around the country. And in this particular case, if we can find a cure for type 1 diabetes, that's not only going to help people in Morrisville, North Carolina, and the US, but also people around the world. There are millions of people who are affected with this. So uh, I'm really hopeful that we can do our little bit to help out.
Fantastic. So, what was it like? I'm going to just start with a few questions. First of all, millions of people die from juvenile diabetes. And when we end this interview today, before we get into the meat of the show, we're going to give everyone a link where they can contribute. But I mean, walk us through, and then I'm going to let the other panelists dive in. But, I have a lot of questions like, how long did you drive? It must have been cold. Did you pack your food? You went on Route 66. Were there times where you got really tired? Obviously you did. And what kept you going? And then when you got there, how many days did you stay before you came back? And then the other thing is, how do you feel now? I mean, what a journey. It's kind of life-changing. I can't even imagine driving across the country, let alone riding on a motorbike.
Well, I always knew it was going to be a challenge. As I mentioned, I'd been thinking of doing this for a while now. Me and a couple of other friends, we wanted to go together. But after I got laid off, I had more time on my hands, and I was like, let me just try to do something different. And that different was trying to go alone. Well, actually, there were two major differences. One was going alone, and the other thing was going in the winter time, because most of the rides that we do typically are over the summer or in the warmer months. Doing it in the winter has a couple of different challenges. You have to have the right gear. I hit low temperatures of about 25 degrees in places like Oklahoma. In Memphis, I got really high winds. The days are shorter, and especially when you're riding alone, you don't want to ride later at night because the visibility is lower. A lot of the bigger trucks and the bigger vehicles are not able to see motorcycles, so you want to try to avoid that. And again, in the wintertime, the days start getting very short, so your daylight hours need to be used for the maximum. To your question, Steve, I tried to ride about 7 to 8 hours a day maximum, but that would mean that I needed to be on the road for about 8 to 10 hours. Because again, when you're on a motorcycle, you have to take more frequent stops. Your gas tank is not bigger as a car is, so almost every 150 to 200 miles, you need to take a break and fill up on gas. And also, I think the body needs some rest as well. The gear you're wearing is very heavy, especially in the winter. You have a heated vest on that's actually attached to your motorcycle. You need that for really, really cool weather. And then everything else on top is, just makes the whole thing very heavy. So it's advisable to take a break every hour and a half to 2 hours when you're riding. Because again, this is not a sprint. It's supposed to be a marathon. So you have to pace yourself.
Right. Fantastic. Well, I'm going to open it up to the floor and just keep this interactive. Just if anyone has any questions, we just wanted to do this today to bring in Guri to allow him to tell the story. And of course, you can just go to JDRF website, Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. Millions die a year, and this is youth diabetes. So, nothing worse than the children having to take insulin or, taking shots. Now there's better therapies, but all the money goes to research. I used to serve on the board of the Triangle chapter. Do we have any questions, folks? And just introduce. So this is our panel, Guri, Mark Lee, Dan Worthington, and Nick Paudiva. And we often have very engaging and passionate conversations politically, but today it's a good break for us to say. So, guys, do you have any questions, please?
Steve, I just have a comment. I'm just in awe of anyone who does anything to help with childhood illnesses, specifically this, but anyone. And my hats go off to you. You're doing God's work on earth.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate those.
Yeah, my hats go off to you as well and everything, because definitely anybody that can do those kind of tricks. I remember growing up in Warrenton, there was a gentleman that actually owned a hardware store that used to go regularly just as part of his exercise regimen to bike treks all over the country. I think one time he went to Florida. He might have even gone to California one time, and that was on the more standard bicycle and all along those lines. But Guri, I was just wondering, and sorry it's being run a little late, I think, what led you to having the connection to juvenile diabetes and what made you so passionate about this particular cause.
Sure, Mark. So as I mentioned, my nephew was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes, or type 1 diabetes, as it's more commonly known, a couple of years ago. We suspect that he's always had type 1 diabetes, but he's always been very active. He's a great athlete and plays a lot of different sports. So I believe that the diabetes symptoms never sort of came out until the pandemic started. So after COVID hit us, everybody was in a lockdown. People were staying at home, not getting enough exercise, not getting out. So I believe maybe 2 or 3 weeks after the lockdowns happened in India, my nephew had to be taken into the ICU because some of his symptoms were really bad. His dad is in fact a doctor himself, and even for him, I mean, it was hard to really catch this because he had not exhibited any symptoms before that. But they took him to the ICU. He was in the ICU for I believe a week to 10 days, and eventually they figured out that the root cause of everything was the fact that he had type 1. So again, I mean, he's leading a normal life now. Well, as normal as it can get, because he still has to regulate his body sugar. He has to, be on insulin, but he's back to being active physically, so that's helping.
How much has diet played a part? Because I do know that in some cultures, diet has definitely played a part in a lot of the diabetes diagnosis. And I know that even at the age that I currently have, which is around that 60 age range and everything, that even my own mom, who's in her 80s, will sometimes ask and make sure that I am still getting checked for diabetes, because we do know that in certain cultures it is more prominent than in others and everything. And actually my brother's lady friend also has that, so I do know what those insulin shots look like, and she's actually a college student, so I think she was diagnosed at a very young age as well. But I was just wondering if you could maybe speak to what you know about the nature of how much diet, and you mentioned exercise, the lifestyle plays into it, because we do know that certain cultures are more inclined to fried foods and other things that can be detrimental to some of those things, and of course even the intake of certain kinds of drinks. I will admit that that's probably why my mom is always checking that I'm checking, because I am definitely an iced tea fan, and definitely a soda fan as well. And we know that that has a lot of sugar and other things that aren't always good for you. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around the importance of diet.
You're absolutely right, Mark. I think for anybody who suffers from diabetes, diet and a lifestyle change is a big component of how you treat it.
Yeah.
Because we all know diabetes is more of a silent killer, right? I mean, it's not something that exhibits its symptoms on a day-to-day basis, but if it's not managed correctly internally, you could be hurting some of your organs. So yeah, I think it's a big lifestyle change. My sister, who's my nephew's mom, she has joined several support groups where they look at what are the alternative foods to help with something like this, so that he does not take too much sugar in his diet. But again, being a child, I remember growing up, I used to love soda, and I used to love eating a lot of junk food and different kinds of stuff. And now he unfortunately is not able to do that. He has to have a very strict regimen and very strict control over what he eats on a day-to-day basis, how much he eats as well.
Now, what's weird is when you exercise, because like for my family, what's interesting is, other than my own wife, I'm the only one in my family and my father that don't have diabetes. And I think part of it is I don't know if there's a correlation between being athletic, because I was a top junior tennis player, a college player, and then after my collegiate career, just kept working out and staying fit. So does that help you if you do even have a genetic tendency? Does that help, or is that just something I'm thinking in my head?
I believe it is all about genetics, which is why gene therapy is something that I believe, has got the most uh, sort of I see that as being the most the biggest sort of a potential cure for for anybody who suffers from diabetes. I mean, I have been very active physically as well. I mean, I still stay physically active, but since my mom suffers from diabetes as well, I see that my sugar levels are higher. I still fortunately haven't had to go on medication, but I still have to control what I'm eating, and I'm trying to watch my diet and again stay physically active. So you're absolutely right,
Yeah.
Steve. I think
Yeah, staying active and then just making sure your diet. Shaquille Latimer, we just talking with Guri Burmi, who rode all across the country from Morrisville to California to raise money for children with diabetes. So we thought it'd be a good holiday edition to bring him on. We're going to keep this going, Guri. We'll save you from politics, but I know that
Steve?
Guri, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quickly, the suggestions of a diet are not restricted for those who are prone to diabetes. I think that's good for all of us,
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
the case.
Yeah,
Hey,
just what we
Guri.
eat. Right.
Hey, Gord,
That,
just really quickly, I'd love to hear your thoughts about, well, actually, I had two quick questions. One, you mentioned the support systems and the support groups, and I definitely am a fan of those support groups and everything, but I just wondered if you could maybe share a little bit about how that has helped your family in more detail and everything, because actually a good friend of mine is a stroke survivor, and I know that even though he had that several years back, he still goes to those support groups. I know that Chris Greco, who is part of our panel, that probably regularly goes to support groups as well. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around the importance of those support groups, both for the family as well as for those that are dealing with whatever they're dealing with.
I think support groups are just amazing, right? Because you're able to talk to people who are in the same shoes as you are, because these are the people who can really understand the pain that you're going through on a day-to-day basis. And for somebody who's already dealt with it, perhaps they can have some thoughts and suggestions around how you can better deal with it. Uh, I think that's really been tremendous for us, just being
yeah.
able to talk to other people.
As
How
you
have you felt?
go ahead.
Just the one thing I was.
Dan Worthington had a point, Mark. Please, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm a type 2 diabetic, and
Mm.
I was undiagnosed until I had my heart attack when I was 59, almost 60.
Wow.
And it's interesting. It is true. Diet is very, very important. Exercise is important too. You've got to watch your carbohydrates. It's okay. Protein's good. I do a protein shake, other things, just to make sure I have had enough protein. It's not that I can't have any carbohydrates, but I have to be very careful with them. I have a monitor that I wear
Mm.
right here, and that I'm
Right.
able to put my phone on and tell me what my sugar is at any given time.
Mhm.
And and so I just go here, and then it reads it, and then tells me, and it allows me to monitor my food intake. It's at 155 this morning, which is a little high. I haven't had anything to eat. I'm fasting. I've got a cataract surgery later today, so I can't eat, and I couldn't take my metformin either. So it is difficult, and especially for children, because they're so young.
Mhm.
You have to learn to live with certain routines. Once I got the patch that I was able to read with my my phone, it became much easier to manage my diabetes
Right.
because I always hated poking my finger and using the stupid blood strips. And the irony is that my insurance company will not pay for this system
Hmm.
because I'm not on insulin, and so I have to pay for it myself. But luckily, Abbott Labs gives me a 50% discount
Yeah,
on it, so
and,
I pay
and
about as much.
Guri, that actually raises an interesting question that Dan brought up and everything, which is a lot of times if you're a juvenile diabetic, you have the support of your family, the support of your uh, parents, your older people that are in your life and everything. But we do know that, when you're under the care, for lack of a better term, of your parents or your guardians and everything, they can help you to make sure that you're doing all the things that you're supposed to do in terms of that routine. But, a lot of the folks that have juvenile diabetes do go off to college, do go off to the workforce, do go off into the adult life and everything. And that routine becomes a little bit harder to deal with because, as Lee likes to talk about, personal responsibility, then you are forced to do that on your own. So I was wondering if that's one of the conversations that you have to have even with your relative and everything, because I don't know whether they're in that college space or not, but I know that that's something that has been a conversation with Effie, who is actually my brother's girlfriend's daughter and everything, and she's now in college, so we have to make sure that she is staying on top of things while also doing her studies and doing her socialization that goes on in college. So just wondering your take on that, if that's a conversation that you've had with the young person that you are dealing with in the life and the reason that you did this.
Yeah, so I don't know my nephew. I mean, fortunately for us, I mean, he's a pretty level-headed kid. He's still in high school. He's the captain of the high school team for athletics. So I mean, and academically as well, he's doing pretty well. So he's a pretty level-headed kid, and he understands and realizes the importance of managing and maintaining a proper diet. Again, it's not easy, guys. I mean, we've all been there, right? I mean, growing up, you just want to eat everything that comes in front of you. But he realizes that he has to exert a better amount of control over what he does. So we are fortunate that way. But I absolutely agree with you that I think it's not easy. In fact, my daughter, she's just started as a freshman in NC State, and her roommate is a type 1 diabetes, and so she's having to go through the same challenge as well now, being on her own in college, living in a dorm. But fortunately that she still takes care. She still keeps her insulin refrigerated. It's not easy, but I think kids are more resilient that way, I believe, and a lot of the smarter ones are able to do it.
So I'm the data guy, Guri. So welcome aboard. I got something on my share screen I just want to show everybody, and that's the top 10 leading causes of death in the United States. And you'll see that this is an age-adjusted death rate. So basically, what happens is it's adjusted for the age, whether it be young or old. And as you can see, the dark bar is diabetes. First of all, diabetes is one of the top 10. That's number one. But diabetes, kidney disease, stroke, and heart disease are all related, as somebody once said. I have heart disease. My dad, my father, and mother both died from diabetic-related illnesses. My father from massive strokes as a result of being a diabetic. So basically what happens is that if you take a look at the dark bar for diabetes, you'll see it's 21.6. That means there's 21.6 deaths per 100,000. That's, so take 100,000 and change that to 330 million, and you'll see that's a lot of deaths that you're talking about. And this is increased now in 2020 to 24.8. So your nephew is one of many people that have either developed diabetes or have, it's been inflamed because of the COVID situation, pandemics, whatever you want to call it. And that's something that needs to be considered in the long run. And the thing is, once you get into that top 10 area, I think that there should be, I realize cancer is number 2, and they're trying to do this moonshot against cancer thing, which I get and all that. But the bottom line is there are diseases that can be controlled and even mitigated, as Dan showed, through different, technology and things like that I think would really be helpful.
Absolutely. And that's a great segue, because in my career, I represent a pharmaceutical company that's actually just from Raleigh that's launched a oral testosterone product. But one thing the CEO has mentioned to me is that, and we're going to try to bring him on the show, of the whole value of preventive care. And even something like testosterone, we don't realize actually reduces, obesity, cardiovascular disease, can actually help minimize pre-diabetics to the point of just getting rid of it. And the point of the matter he made with me one day is that we spend $300 billion in the United States just on diabetes treatment. And that is something really, really amazing. I mean, imagine if we could work on better preventive care so that, and that's the irony, is our healthcare costs keep going up.
Steve?
And people, so that's.
I'm sorry, you're talking about preventive care. Is there anything, Guri, that you may know this? I have no idea. The diet of the mother while pregnant, does it have any effect on whether a child will develop diabetes?
I'm not aware of
I don't think so.
how it can affect you, but I had a very interesting conversation with a gentleman during my recent ride. I was in California. I just pulled over at a gas station, and I was talking to the gentleman who got off his van, and I mentioned to him that I was raising funds for juvenile diabetes. He happened to be a doctor, and his thought was that breastfeeding can be very, very helpful for kids. And again, I don't know how much of this is actually true or how much of it is, how much medical value there is to it. But his suggestion was that mothers should breastfeed for at least 2 years because there are certain uh, uh, not really sure
Enzymes.
the right words, but yeah,
Yeah.
Proteins.
The enzymes or nutrients or something like that within
right,
the breast milk and everything. Just really quickly,
exactly.
I don't know when we'll get to other
And
issues. But I
insulin is a
just want,
hormone, by the way, which is interesting. It's a
yeah,
hormone,
that's
just like
yeah,
vitamin D and testosterone. So,
yeah.
but
But
anyway.
yeah,
So
just really quickly, I just had one other quick question because I actually had the pleasure last year of working to help another friend of mine with another ailment and everything. But they were running for Man of the Year for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society and all along those lines. So they got several podcasters and others together to help raise funds for that cause. And of course, there's the American Diabetes Association, and we were doing it under, like I said, the guise of the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. So I was just wondering, Guri, if you think that there are enough of those organizations and are they doing enough in the causes that they are a part of and all in those lines. And I don't know whether this ride was with a particular foundation or anything of that nature, but I was just wondering your take as to whether these kind of organizations are doing enough work. Because like I said, I know that Tim Sohn, who was the person I was working for, raised a decent amount of money. And I know that those go on in all the states, and that's in that leukemia lymphoma space. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about the nature of the organizations and if they're doing enough work.
Yeah, so the reason that we picked Diabetes Research Foundation over the others, and again, I'm not 100% sure how much work they are doing and not doing. Uh, I would like to think that they're all doing great work, but again, my focus is really to try to see if we can fix this disease from the root cause. Steve mentioned that there are millions and billions of dollars being spent on preventative care and also on managing the symptoms of diabetes, which is great. But I would really like to see us spend money on fixing this disease from the root cause. Something like a gene therapy. I know there are some companies out there that are doing some gene therapy work to fix diabetes, because I again strongly believe that a lot of this has to do with genetics, and if we can fix it, I know the big pharma probably don't want to do it because it's loss of revenue for them, but that should be our focus.
absolutely, and I think that we're gonna let's let Guri close out. And if Guri, you're willing to stay with us. Guri actually ran for the city council. I ran a great campaign, came close. Hopefully, we can get him to run again. He's also he's an independent now, but he was actually a proud member of Republican Party, a moderate Republican, a good Republican. Guri, we have a lot of Republicans on the show, but we respect all political beliefs. But he's an entrepreneur, and he's we'd love to bring your perspective in to talk about coming to America and the kinds of things you've done as someone from India, and we'd welcome you back anytime you want. Are there any final insight you want to share with us, just in terms of what you've learned from this, what you want others to learn from this, and of course, we thank you for pursuing this great cause.
Before Gary closes out, I haven't said anything yet, so I might.
Yeah, sorry, Shaquille, please. I'm sorry.
If you don't mind. So, just quickly, we've sort of talked so far as though type 1 and type 2 diabetes are interchangeable, and they're not. Type 1 diabetes is obviously a genetic issue, and so the treatments for it, as Gary is pointing out, things like gene therapy and things like that, is going to be totally different to the types of things that you can do to either prevent or to treat type 2 diabetes. But it is a major issue, and it's not just in America. I think in most advanced democracies, we are seeing huge increases in the rates of diabetes in our populations. And I think it's very interesting to have a look at where people come from originally and what's happening once they move to Western countries. So, if Indians in India have a much lower prevalence of type 2 diabetes than they have in, for example, the United States, then that indicates that there's something else that environmental which is causing it. If Chinese people in China have lower rates than they do in America, again, then there's obviously something that's going on. I think that the very, very high levels of sugar in our food is causing a problem. For myself, a lot of my weight came from drinking juices. I thought that was a healthy alternative as a teenager to drinking soft drinks, and I piled the weight on when I was in my 20s. So, I think if we can try to get some of those refined sugars out of our foods, and obviously we have to encourage people to be more active and exercise more, but we should certainly be encouraging companies to come up with healthier alternatives. And unfortunately, some of the soft drink companies have changed to these sugar substitutes, no sugar type things, but they can have a very similar response in the body to actually having the sugar itself. And so we really need to wean people off that really sweet.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because I know one summer everyone got scared. My blood sugar came really high, but I was having these tropical smoothie cafes almost every day, and it's just so sweet. And I was drinking that every day, and my sugar just spiked because they're so full of sugars. And so even for me, I had to quit drinking those kind of artificial smoothies and actually make my own, or But
for me personally, I actually, after cutting sugar out of my diet, I actually managed to lose 20 kilos, which I'm not 100% sure what that converts to in pounds, but it's probably about 45 pounds, I think, something like that, 45, 50 pounds. Yeah. And I lost that very, very quickly. So, yeah, I think that's something that health departments and groups like the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, should be talking to companies that produce foods and say, look, we do have an issue here. It is very, very strange that in Western countries, obesity is actually a sign of poverty. You actually see higher rates of obesity amongst the poor people than you do amongst the wealthy people. In most other countries in the world, you actually would be the opposite way, that the people who are obese tend to be the ones that are much wealthier. So that tends to indicate that there is a supply, a low-cost supply of food products that are not ideal for health, and that's something that that countries need to work on as a priority.
Yeah, absolutely. So remember, it's Guri Burmi, and he has been on with us, and we're gonna, Guri, you could stay with us, but we want to thank you.
I would let Guri close out his thoughts before you say.
Glory, please close out, and you're welcome to stay with us if you want. And we're going to talk about politics and just some different things going on in the world. But any final thoughts? And if you want it, it's very entertaining. Lots of different opinions and views. And but tell us your final thoughts.
Well, Steve, first of all, thanks to you and the panel. This has been a really great discussion. I see some very learned people on the panel. So, hopefully we can all make a difference, guys. I mean, just doing a little bit, right? I mean, it's just one small thing that matters. So I'm going to keep on working to see how we can get more funding towards the diabetes research, and any help and support that you guys can give, that'll be great.
Okay, well, we're going to follow you. I think it was a really great coverage of him coming in and a great moment. And we're going to be bringing it back again. Guri, what do we invite you back? We'd love to get your insights about just being an entrepreneur or being an immigrant, kind of like what's going on in American politics today. We'd love to get your perspective. So I'll be reaching back out to you, and, we can bring you on whenever you have time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, folks. We're going to continue our conversation. We've got Guri Burmi with us live on Roku TV, talking about his ride across America. It was a great thing, guys. Thanks for letting me bring him in. That was very special. Let's get into some of the events of the day. I mean, the first one is the shutdown. Looks like here we are again, December 23rd, the new deadline. I mean, it's hopefully they'll make it work. And I don't know.
This is, something, Steve, this is getting absolutely ridiculous. I mean, this is unfreaking believable. What they need to do is, with these assholes in Congress, is to sit there and say, I'll tell you what, jerk off, if you're going to play with the federal government, here's what happens. Until you pass this sucker, you don't get paid. We are going to remove we are gonna completely eliminate your salary. We ought to put it in a freaking amendment to the Constitution. You don't get something passed, by God, you don't get paid. Oh, and by the way, you don't get paid, you don't get health benefits, you get nothing until you pass this sucker. This happened in the 1970s when and all things, Nixon was in charge, but basically what they did was they decided that they were gonna. It used to be July to June. That was our fiscal year, July to June. We never up to that point missed a problem with congressional passage of the budget. Then you know what they did? They said, we need to change that. We need to change that to October. So they went from July to October. Why? Because they needed more time to get the budget done. And then after that, I don't know if they've ever passed a budget on time after that point in time. I tell them, you don't pass, guess what? You don't get to go on vacation. You don't get paid. You get nothing. You got to pass this sucker by October the 1st, or by God, crap is going to happen. You get you don't get paid. Let me tell you something. I was in the military when they pulled this crap. And I'll tell you what happened. One time I was overseas. I was deployed overseas. And all of a sudden they came through and they said, hey, Chris, guess what? We got a problem. I said, what's the problem? They said, well, September 30th. And I said, so? And they said, well, we don't have a budget. So we don't have a budget. We can't. Now
His Wi-Fi.
and we're not going to be able to pay you. So, I think we're losing it here. So, bottom line on this whole thing is, this is bullcrap, and I am totally and completely sick of it. We need either, I can't believe that the United States citizens are not pulling the rug underneath these assholes. I'm sick of it.
Chris,
every goddamn year, these suckers do this crap.
I sick of it on all sides. Left and
Can I
right,
just
and
ask?
Hold on a second, because Shaquille, I'm actually coming to you. I'm actually coming to you, Shaquille. So I've
son of a bitch.
We're all sick of it and everything. But I was curious because we're acting like it's a United States problem, and I've actually been doing a little bit of studying since he studies me and everything, and what I'm thinking all the time. But apparently, the notion of politics and extremism in politics isn't just in the United States, because I've been reading that there's a lot of things going on in Australia where there was a shooting, and some people are concerned that some of the extremist views are going to be going into that thing. And one of the headlines I said that a Queensland shooting political leader expressed concerns over the potential role of right-wing extremists in the politics. And somebody else said that extremist politics won't get the wages moving again. And that was coming from Australia. So we're acting like it's just a United States problem. My thing is that it seems like it's a problem all around the world. And I'd love to hear more about it from the Australian in the room, because I just found this yesterday. I meant to bring it up yesterday when I first saw these articles and everything. But what's going on in Australia, Shaquille? Or is it something that's going on all over the world?
Before we change the topic completely away from what was brought up, I've got a couple of questions about this. So, firstly, I think Lee's put a poll out saying, what's the point of having, or is there a point of having a debt ceiling if they just continually if they continually raise it? This is absurd as political policies. Secondly, if you can't pass the budget, firstly, I've said many times before, they shouldn't even be able to pass legislation until they read, not just sign as another poll has said, but they actually read it. It should be read on the floor before it's passed. And if that legislation refers to regulations, they should have to go and get those regulations and read them to the floor to make sure, and there should be a debate on every single part of every bit of legislation. The fact that the US Senate tries to tell the rest of the world that they are the premier legislative body to consider legislation in the world, right? And then they're passing things that that haven't been read or considered properly is absolutely absurd. And I'll just say one last thing if I can. Sorry, Lee. I'll just say one last thing. So, Steve, when you say hopefully they get this passed, why hopefully? It's very interesting because the last 3 times I've been to the United States, I've been there under 3 different presidents. And each time I've come, maybe I'm the one who causes it because I'm about to come back over. Every single time I've come, there's been a government shutdown. Now, I wasn't actually familiar with government shutdowns. It's not something that we're used to here in Australia. But when I started reading about it, it said, well, federal agencies, they have to shut down all their non-essential services. Well, why don't you just leave it like that? Why is it not essential? Right? Stop it. Give
Get rid of all the people who are non-essential.
and get government the hell out of the way, and you wouldn't have these problems, right? But people like Nick over there, his solution to every problem is absolute authoritarian government control over every aspect of our lives.
It's true.
That would help us. Now, over to you, Mark. Sorry, Lee, I'll come straight back to you. Over to you, Mark, in 30 seconds or less. This is not an opinion coming from somebody from all of Australia. This is an opinion coming from a Labor Party Premier of Queensland who is pretty disliked around the country, okay, whose political policies and the green policies of the Federal Parliamentary Labor Party sit on the left of progressive Democrats. So the fact that she has said something which, you know, like this about extreme right-wingers, her version of extreme right-wingers are moderate Labor Party members. That's her version of extreme right-wingers, just like your progressives in America would call people who are moderate Democrats extremists. So
let me ask you this, because Richard Holden, who apparently is an economics professor over there in Australia, says price controls and excess profit taxes aren't the solution for inflation, which requires focusing on the improvements on the supply side of economy. And he said for the first time since the 80s, y'all are seeing high inflation rates in Australia. And with this has come a meaningful reduction in real wages. And we're also seeing increases in profits. He's saying that those policies won't get the wages.
The whole world is experiencing this. Price controls have never worked, okay, ever. So introducing them does not make any sense. So because it doesn't make sense, we know they're not going to work. What does the political left say? Let's introduce price controls. What does Australia's Labor Party say we're going to do to help the economy of Australia? Let's shut down our coal-fired power stations, with the national energy market operators saying, you know, the whole east coast of Australia, where 3/4 of Australians live, we're not going to have any power in 2024. Because it's one thing to transition to green and renewable energy sources, but you actually have to transition to them. You don't just shut everything down before you've done that. But no, they've got to listen to progressive Democrats in the United States because they can't come up with a coherent thought themselves. And then they decided, well, look, now the energy companies are saying they're going to turn to gas. Here's an idea. Let's shut gas down as well. How ridiculous. Lee, take over.
Yeah, real quick, to you and also to Chris, to your point in terms, the representatives, before any bill is passed, they need to read and initial a sign acknowledging they read the whole stupid thing. And also, I would add, it should be available online, searchable to the public for a period of a week. So we know what's going on. And to Chris, in terms of the congressman not being paid, the whole staff shouldn't be paid. The whole staff should not be paid while we're waiting for a budget.
Lee, you want
to take it serious or we don't?
According to the Constitution, of the United States, the House of Representatives only has one primary. They have two or three, but one primary issue. One, they're the purse strings. That's all they're responsible for is the frickin' money, budgetary aspects. They are in charge of the money. They're in charge of it. So why don't they just get in charge of it? Get the hell off their asses and let's get going with this budget stuff. Enough of this. And, it's amazing to me how they can sit back and they can go, oh, we got to do the Respect for Marriage Act because that is important. But in the meantime, they're doing that. They're wasting time not doing the budget. So basically, the people, they sit back and they go, oh, my God, you know what it sounds like to me? It sounds like a high school kid that has to do a paper and it's due in December. And he decides in November the 30th to start the paper. This is bullcrap. Get on the calendar. They have a legislative calendar. Get on the calendar and talk about this crap. Get it done.
Chris,
they're something
else too that I'd love to hear.
Signing every page doesn't mean that they've read it. That's why I believe it should be read on the House floor. Every single part of it should be read on the House floor, and those people who aren't present shouldn't be able to vote unless they've got a very good reason.
That's fair enough.
No, I agree with you on that.
Because they pass way too much legislation, way too many regulations. But as to Chris's point, I'm more than prepared to sit down and understand people who are on the political opposite side of the spectrum to me, of course. Okay, they need to also understand that people that have run businesses and people that have employed people and have created jobs and created economic activity need to have a voice as well. The bottom line is, as I have always said, only the worst failed lawyers become politicians as a general rule, okay, because they sucked at everything else. So they go into politics. Would you trust any company to politicians? If you wanted to bankrupt the company, you'd put politicians.
Hell yeah.
So why are we trusting these
man,
to run our country?
Steve, you're so crazy.
Hey, you know, you have another problem with your
Get in
wonderful.
the game, man. Fight.
They spend money like water. Like, come on. Part of the reason we're having this.
Come on, it's your party, Nick. It's your party.
Part of this problem is what are we doing buying charging stations for Tesla all over the country at the cost of $70 billion?
But Nick, hold on a second.
What are we doing? Everybody who cries with a social or lobbyist gets funded.
Only rich people can afford Teslas.
What are we doing spending money on charging stations?
But hold on a second, Lee, and
what are we doing spending money on?
I want to come back to something else that Chris was about to bring up yesterday as well. Hold on a second, I want to get to something else that Chris was about to bring up yesterday, which is the notion of COVID testing and what's going on there. Because the federal government has said that they're going to offer free at-home COVID tests as part of their winter plan. So apparently we're still in the middle of COVID.
Mark, there's no such thing as free.
There's nothing.
We all have to pay for it.
Hey, look, there would be more value if they charged people for the COVID vaccine. Don't give it to them for free. Charge them for it. Okay, there'd be more value. Then people realize there's value to that. When they said free COVID test, that was totally wrong. And if somebody goes, well, I can't afford it, then they can make an application and they can waive it. But don't give what you have up in La La Land in Washington is a bunch of people that just give out money like it's candy. And now we have a balanced budget.
I've got to pull you up a second here, Nick.
Social Security is broke. Medicare is broke
because on yesterday's show,
we're in debt $30 trillion, and you got a bunch of idiots running it. My homeowners association, which is a bunch of idiots, runs their homeowner association better than the federal government. And I'm sitting there.
They're Democrats too.
Every homeowner
association. These people
I've got to pull you up here because you said on yesterday's show that you wanted the whole country to be run like airports are because there's no mass shootings at airports, right? There is no mass shootings either inside jails. So presumably, by your theory, that's what the country should look like. So here you are agreeing with us that Washington and other political capitals around the world are out of control and run by force, but yet you decide as a solution to many of the issues brought up that the way to solve it is by having authoritarian, overly powerful government interfere with the freedoms that we are used to.
A lot of cases.
Hey, you know something. Speaking of law, speaking of all this stuff, Nick, put up my share screen here. I want to put up the congressional record for yesterday. The congressional record. I want to put up the congressional for the December 13th. I want you to especially go right here. Congratulating the University of Georgia School of Law. This is the House of Representatives on December 13th. They take time out of their day to do this crap. Mr. Carty of Georgia. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the University of Georgia School of Law for being named the best value in legal education by the National Jurist magazine. Yes, absolutely. Let's not pass anything. Let's do this crap because that's important. You know?
That's absolutely disgusting. My husband had no business in Congress. I agree with you.
Something really quickly.
Oh, that's important. Let's put it up again. There we go. There we go. Very important. We need well-educated, ethical, and competent employees. Yes, we do.
Guys.
He's made. There's no law for me and my children. Years old. The other one.
I think everyone's talking. I don't know why I just don't ramble on.
Yeah, hold on. Time out. Everybody.
Let me make a point here, guys. My analogy of the day is that politics is like, I don't know, have you seen a puppet show? So it's a good act, it's entertainment, and the puppet masters, the ones that are pulling the strings behind the curtain, those are the lobbyists.
Steve, if you think
those are the money
Steve, if you think it's an entertaining show, that's no problems. But why don't you and the people that vote for the Democrats pay for it instead of making other people pay for it that don't want to go and see the show?
How do you know this was a Democrat who put this up?
Republican thing.
People blame the Democrat. This could be a Republican.
We want a show. We want to fight.
Mr. Carter,
Ethan who is 6, and Asana, I can't read it.
It's like Apollo
has been an immeasurable blessing to our family. Who is this person who's coming onto the House floor talking about their family?
Who's Mr. Carter of Georgia? We need to give him 40 laughs.
Nick and Shaquille, I brought it up again.
Mr. Carter,
everybody else yelling and everything. But what are people thinking about? The feds apparently are suing Arizona
Someplace
over the
in
border
Mexico.
wall because the border wall was made of shipping containers and everything. I'm sure that there's more to it, but they're suing them against the border wall. I thought we wanted a border wall at one point or another, but apparently they're suing them, and it's also because of the way the shipping wall was made and everything. And that was actually from yesterday as well. But any thoughts around the Feds suing Arizona over this alleged border wall that's over there on their in between Arizona and Mexico?
Oh, you're talking about the immigration problem that that the Republicans created at the border. Is that what we're discussing now?
No, it's a Democratic problem.
The crisis they
immigration
created
problem.
by trying to build a wall that Democrats stopped, and then Joe Biden decided to spend more money stopping the wall from being built than what it would have cost to complete. Is that the border crisis you're saying? The Republicans
the wall is stupid to begin with. See, the thing is, immigration. Realize that we don't have enough people in the United States who are willing to work. These people, if they come over and they're willing to work, give them a job. I was at they have these things called Cracker Barrels. I hope no one ever goes to them, but I go to them.
Oh, it's
When
good
you're
stuff.
desperate, you have to eat somewhere, right? And
I like Cracker Barrel.
they had plenty of seats, but they couldn't seat us. Why? Because no one was working.
Why do you think, Nick?
No one is working?
That's interesting, though, Nick.
Well,
isn't it?
first of all, it's because
it's
the bloody.
interesting. It's interesting that
You
when
know
you
why-
say
what I thought.
it's interesting that when you see immigration
suck all the
trends,
money out of the Cracker Barrel, that's problem number one. Problem number two is just basically this: the American workers want to get paid, and they're not getting paid enough, so they don't even bother work. They'll go work somewhere else, and that's fine. Bring the immigrants on; they'll fill up the Cracker Barrels. They'll work.
So
Why
it's interesting. It's a very
I don't know.
it's a very interesting situation, right? You as I've brought up on Economics Monday a couple of Mondays ago, you have unions ask for higher wages, but then the consumer isn't required to buy goods at those higher wages. So what happens? The jobs get shipped offshore. There's no tariffs put on the goods coming back in, which undercuts American producers and has left America an industrial wasteland where it was once an industrial powerhouse. Same thing applies for Canada, Australia, New Zealand, most of Western Europe. Now, it's very, very interesting, isn't it, that when immigration goes out of control, it's blamed on the left, it's blamed on the right, but it always happens under the left. So what have we seen? We've seen this huge influx of immigrants in the United States when politics went from Republicans to Democrats. We've seen a massive increase in immigration into Canada after things went from Stephen Harper across to the clown who's in charge at the moment. What have we seen in Australia? We've now started seeing illegals trying to arrive into Australia by boat because we've switched from 9 years of the Liberal and Conservative parties across to the Labor Party. What are we seeing in the UK under Labor parties? At the moment, it's still controlled by the Tories, but if it goes back to Labor, what do you see? What do you see with left-wing European Union members? They have created an immigration nightmare so that countries like Sweden are complaining about it. So it's pretty funny how immigration issues are caused by the left, and then the left puts their hands up and says, oh, you know what? It's those pesky conservatives that have asked for it.
Yeah, well, it's a fault of both. But by the way, let me tell you who wasted a lot of our time. It was a Republican, Chris. His name is Representative Buddy Carter from Georgia.
Yes, I looked that up. Yeah, first district in Georgia. I'm sorry, I was muted. Sorry.
He had the gall. I would go crazy if I was in Congress. I'd go crazy. I said, sit your butt down. We have work to do. We don't want to listen to your pandering about the University of Georgia's law school.
That's his constituents, man. That's Athens.
If he was in working for a company, he'd be fired in the spot. But unfortunately,
this guy's referred to a university. What about
Republicans,
whoever it
listen
was?
to me. You got a Republican idiot. His name is Carter. And he's
What
in
about
Georgia.
whoever it was in the
Well,
first
no,
column
we
who
can
talked about
read them all off. They're all
his or her
idiots.
husband and their kids? What did that
Yeah,
have to do
they're all
with
idiots.
actually?
Hey, just really quickly,
He
we got
wasted
to talk
the
back to
country's
Steve to
time.
close
He
out
should
and
be billed
everything,
for
but I wish I said
I
come up because I was
nobody
going to say
explains what
just
I'm saying.
the
What about in the first column where somebody referred to his or her husband and their 3 kids? Like, why is that? No, isn't that just as much, if not more, a waste of time as what?
Yeah, it is a waste of time.
So
It
I
is
would
a
have
waste
thought
of time,
that's more.
Shaquille.
That's an even
Don't
more
waste
waste of
my
time
time
than
on
someone
that.
talking about University of Georgia.
Well,
Well,
the
I mean,
University of
there's a lot
Georgia is a waste of
time in those
time.
documents. I mean, there's a lot of
I have
pork
no
barrel.
idea.
There's a lot of pork barreling on
Not a
both
lot.
sides, and that's been going
Right.
on for decades, if not centuries, and everything. But just really quickly, I know that Sasha had popped in earlier, but the U.S. plans to more than double the number of Ukrainian troops it's training in Germany. That was one of the news stories I was going to try to get to. And I do know that this weekend we now have a World Cup final. So it will be France against Algeria and everything. A lot of people are hoping that Messi wins because he's never won a World Cup. And of course, we know Chris Greco is not rooting for anything French or anything along those lines.
Argentina, Messi, Argentina.
Yeah.
But France
And
is the
also
reigning champion, so we'll see if they repeat or not.
And the
I
United
do
States.
want to say that technically speaking, Australia is actually the third best soccer team in the world. If you think about it, the only two teams that beat us are actually both the finalists in the World Cup. Therefore, meaning that we didn't really come near last, we are actually the third best soccer team in the world.
I like that thinking. I'm trying
That's really good, Shaquille. That's good. Tennis clap for that one.
I've been learning Common Core maths just to see what's happening. That's how I've done this calculation.
Cool.
Well, my last joke I was a soccer player as a young kid growing up, and I remember being in the state championship. I was in 6th grade, and the guy on the team was the son of the governor at that time, Jay Rockefeller. And they had fired a guy from England to train the team. And when the governor came in the motorcade, we were all so intimidated. And I remember one guy from England taking a bicycle kick, another did a scissors kick, another did a somersault on a corner kick. At the end of the day, the game was 22-1. I never played soccer again, but it was an amazing experience. On that note, we're going to be back. As I close out, we're going to be hopefully tomorrow bringing in a guest to talk about Moore versus Harper. And then we'll wrap up the week of just political turbulence going on, talk about the elections, but spend a little time talking about Jimmy Carter. Looks like he's winding down finally from the Carter Center, sort of moved off into a very private life. Hopefully he's doing okay. He's 99 years old. And but it's been quite a run for the president, working with Emory University, my alma mater. And we're reaching out to folks at the Carter Center to come in and talk about the 40-year anniversary of the Carter Center. They did so many great things. And with that being said, a point of personal privilege, I lost a very close friend. I found out that he died actually in March, and my family didn't know, but he was the father of my tennis coach. His name was Don Riedeveld. He was an engineer. He was a great leader in West Virginia. For over 50 years, he led the efforts to lead in the tennis industry, and hundreds of junior tennis players trained under his wife and him, Mary Esther, his first wife. And it was amazing, the memories I have of all of the tennis matches we played. I don't really have many memories of my childhood without being on a tennis court with him or his son, Bud, my coach, traveling to tournaments. And it was hard last night to find out that he had passed and that we never even really knew. But I learned a lot from him on the court, and want to thank him for in West Virginia for just being such a leader and really opening up public recreational tennis. At the time, someone like me, the son of immigrants, wasn't very common to be in a tennis club, and it was amazing to be able to chance. And because of him and his wife, I was able to play at a high level. So I want to thank him, and we'll be thinking about him today, even though he died months ago. From our family to yours, I wish you all the best on this wonderful show. I encourage you to send us your ideas of things you would like us to talk about. And I'm going to end the show a little early today. I think it's around 11 o'clock. Thank you all. May the light and love of our hearts always lift us out of the darkness. Thank you. Be safe.